Hello, everyone. I'm Lindsay Reiser. You've been watching a CBS News special report. A jury has found the president's son, Hunter Biden, guilty on all three charges in his federal gun trial. The charges against the president's son include falsifying statements in order to obtain a firearm and firearm possession by an unlawful drug user or addict. He could face up to 25 years in prison for his crimes. We have team coverage following all of this. Let's first bring in CBS News Homeland Security and Justice reporter Nicole Sganga. She's at the courthouse in Wilmington, Delaware. So, Nicole, tell us about the moment inside when that verdict was read, who was there today, what we should know about this verdict.
Yeah, absolutely, Lindsay. Good to be with you. I'm standing outside the courthouse in Wilmington now, and inside the courtroom, members of the Biden family surrounding Hunter Biden as that verdict was read. The First Lady was in the courthouse, but not the courtroom. She had not yet made it back in time. And just moments ago, we saw members of the First family exiting through courthouse doors. And it's remarkable just the security scene that played out here in Wilmington as that all went down. I probably counted close to a dozen federal agents and officers, including officers with canines, sweeping this scene, ensuring the safety and security of Hunter Biden as he left. Certainly law enforcement outnumbering protesters here today, exercising their First Amendment, and we've seen a few of them. But obviously this verdict bringing to a close a very painful chapter in the Biden family history and a very painful trial, quite frankly.
Are we expecting to hear from anyone soon? I mean, from your vantage point, can you see whether any microphones are set up?
There is an area with microphones. It is possible that we could hear from lawyers for both Hunter Biden and for the government special counsel David Weiss. Momentarily, we've not yet heard any news of that. We did see Hunter leave with First Lady Jill Biden, not likely to make any remarks at this time. And as you heard, earlier on our special report, President Biden set to make some remarks later today. He's actually at a firearm safety event, hosting one at the White House back in Washington, D.C. But as of now, we are in a holding pattern.
Okay, Nicole, flag us something develops. Let's bring in CBS News legal contributor and Loyola Law School professor Jessica Levinson. Jessica, first, your reaction to this and what happens now?
Well, my reaction is that a quick verdict, as we had talked about, is usually good for the prosecution, even though this is the type of case that is not typically brought as a standalone charge. The prosecution did have a lot of evidence here. I mean, the questions were fairly straightforward in the sense that we're looking at these federal forms. We're asking ourselves whether or not Hunter Biden lied when he said, no, I'm not a drug addict, and therefore I can purchase this gun, and whether or not he violated the federal law that says you can't possess a gun if you are a known drug user, an illegal drug user. And the defense, I think, did as well as they possibly could have, trying to place reasonable doubt in the minds of the jury, trying to say there's this question about whether or not Hunter Biden knew that he was a drug addict at the time, understood that at that moment he was an addict. What happens next is obviously there will be a lot of filings before this particular judge leading up to sentencing, but then we can also expect appeals. As we've been hearing about this morning and talking about, I think one of the most interesting grounds for appeal is really the Second Amendment argument, where he would argue, and has argued unsuccessfully so far, that under the current Supreme Court's reading of the Second Amendment, the law that he was tried under is not constitutional. This would obviously be something that, as a political matter, President Biden would not embrace because he's in favor of more restrictive gun control measures. But as a legal matter for his son's case, I think that is an argument that we will see come up again. And I do think it's a real argument.
Jessica, before we let you go, I want to ask you one more thing. How rare are cases like this to be brought?
So rare in the sense that this is not a charge that is unheard of, but it is a charge that is rare as a, again, standalone charge. And Hunter Biden obviously wanted to avoid this moment. He is facing prison time. I don't think that he will face the maximum of 25 years. I don't think the prosecution's going to ask for the maximum of 25 years, but I think that he is facing time behind federal prison bars. And how rare is this? Again, I haven't canvassed the nation statistically in terms of how often does this particular charge show up as a standalone, but it's not typical. That doesn't mean there's something illegitimate about the verdict. It just means that it's not typical.
Okay, Jessica, thank you. I want to bring in CBS News congressional correspondent Scott MacFarlane. He's been covering this trial for us. He's outside the courthouse in Wilmington, Delaware, along with CBS News reporter Erica Brown. Erica, I want to go with you first. You were inside. What was Hunter Biden's reaction and the reaction, if any, of the rest of the courtroom?
Well, Hunter Biden was focused as this verdict came down. It was read by a courtroom deputy, not the jury foreperson, not another member of the jury. As they filed in, he was standing up, his arms and hands crossed in front of them. As it was read by the courtroom deputy, he and his attorneys were seated. He was focused. He was looking straight ahead. He exhibited hardly any emotion. After they read off each guilty verdict, Hunter Biden to his left and his right, greeting each one of his attorneys, hugging them, thanking them, and then on the way out, kissing and hugging his wife, Melissa Cohen Biden.
Scott, I have a few questions for you about this case, but first, I just want you to help us understand how significant this moment is. This is the first time charges have been brought against the child of a sitting U.S. president, a president who's running for re-election. What's the significance of this moment?
Well, not only is this the first time a sitting president's child has been convicted in a criminal trial or even brought to a federal criminal trial, but the sentencing timing here seems quite striking. The judge in this case estimated it'd be about 120 days until they go to sentencing, and some back of the paper math will show you that's mid-October. That's within weeks of the election. And if he is sentenced to prison time, likely he'd be given a report date. That's 30 days or so after sentencing. That's between Election Day and the end of the presidential term. None of this is happening in a vacuum, and the president's son is now set to be sentenced for a criminal case, and potentially right there on the eve of an election. I'll also note this singular, visceral family tragedy we watched play out right there in the courtroom, with the First Lady of the United States in the front row, with Hunter Biden's family and his current wife in the front row. We all watched his ex-wife testify about the pain of his drug addiction, his own daughter testify about the pain of his drug addiction, then his late brother's widow, a woman with whom he also had a romantic relationship, testify about his addiction, her addiction, both of which were generated by Beau Biden's death, and then her throwing that gun that is pivotal to this case away in a grocery store dumpster. This was an Orwellian tragedy that we watched play out over 7 days in a courtroom here.
Before we let both of you go, Scott, this is also not the end of Hunter Biden's legal troubles. He faces a tax case out of California. What can you tell us about that?
Oh, by the way, the same special counsel, David Weiss, has got charges involving taxes in the federal court system in California. That trial is likely in September, so that happens too before sentencing in this case. The same special counsel who brought this case is bringing that one. It's also in the federal system. Hunter Biden now has growing legal problems after this conviction.
Scott and Erica, thank you. CBS News political correspondent Caitlin Huey-Burns is at the White House. Caitlin, first I want to ask you, the president, he has said he has ruled out a pardon for his son. That was prior to the conviction. What can you tell us about those comments and whether you are hearing from any of your sources about whether the door is open for any other future actions?
Hi, Lindsay. Good to see you. Well, we know the president is here at the White House today, and you know, I can't help but note the irony that later today he's expected to go to a hotel in Washington for an Everytown gun safety event where he is supposed to tout the administration's efforts to curb gun violence. And this, of course, comes as his son is now convicted on gun charges. I should also note that we have not heard from the president yet today or his campaign. But at the beginning of this trial, he did issue a statement in which he noted his love for his son. He said, "I am the president, but I am also a dad." He said, "As president, I don't and I won't comment on pending federal cases. But as a dad, I have boundless love for my son, confidence in him, and respect for his strength." I should also note that President Biden expressed confidence in and support of the U.S. justice system after the conviction, the felony conviction of his political rival, Donald Trump, in that criminal case in New York. After that conviction came down, Biden said at the time, "This is how the American system of justice works." He said it's reckless, it's dangerous, and it's irresponsible for anyone to say it was rigged just because they don't like the verdict. The American justice system, he said, is literally the cornerstone of America. So that gives you a sense of his view of the U.S. justice system. When it came, of course, to Donald Trump, we expect that view to hold. But again, we are waiting specific comments from the White House, from the president on this news of the verdict regarding his son, Hunter.
Okay, we will be staying tuned. Caitlin Huey-Burns, thank you so much. Our thanks also to Nicole Sganga, to Scott MacFarlane, Erica Brown, Jessica Levinson, Caitlin as well. We are, of course, going to have continuing coverage of this at the top of our next hour on CBS News 24/7. Hunter Biden, the president's son, convicted on all 3 counts in his federal gun trial.